Well, Gnostic is, as of nowsis, knowledge. Because if you go preaching the knowledge and it's contrary to the worldly powers that be around you, then you tend to get persecuted. So Gnostic tends to be secret knowledge. Especially, of course, if the true and valid knowledge is not the one that's currently reigning in your society. It has to be secret. It's hidden. Because similarly, when we talk in parables and parallels, the truth is hidden. In some sense. It's not hidden then because it's going to offend the powers that be in the world. It's hidden in the sense that, if your heart's not in this, you don't take it in the way as if your heart were in it. You know, I tell you about a sower and I'm not spiritual, I just say, well, he's on about planting seed. What's he getting at? You know, you don't immediately jump to the notion, it's his words that are perhaps the seed and that these grow into something wonderful in those that have ears to hear and believe it. I don't see that Marcion was the be-all and end-all of Gnostics. He was a Gnostic, yes, and he had some way-out ideas, as a great chunk of the Gnostic church did have. I mean, it wasn't a unified body. That was the whole point. It's for the believer to consider, well, what he thinks the truth is. And that will depend on his values as they are at present. And if he lives by those values, then he'll find out the validity of such or not. You know, whether they're valid or not valid. I mean, you mustn't miss the point, I think, that Paul doesn't reference Jesus' teaching. He doesn't have a gospel in front of him. He knows of the Christ. A bit like the teacher of righteousness. And of course, what's edited into these writings? You know, what's added and what's omitted, and whole letters that suited the church to add and probably write themselves. It's very hard to say what's what, but Marcion is taken to have the opinion that Paul's pretty wonderful in being Gnostic compared to the Roman Church. Roman Church didn't want Gnosticism because you don't want competition in the state's view of things, what the religion is to be. So one can imagine at least them adding to and editing Paul's writings. And what's the original Pauline view? Well, whether the church tampered with it or not, they don't seem to have added much of Jesus into it. And the Paul they end up with in the rest of the New Testament, other than the Gospels, is something that seems to be foundational to the way they've structured their church. Literalism and so forth. Is it anti-Jewish? Looks a bit that way. Is it anti-Marcion? Yes, clearly. Is it pro-Jesus story? Doesn't seem to emphasize what Jesus said. Is the Jesus story Gnostic? Well, it's knowledge that has been hidden, of course, by the Christian Church in emphasizing what it wants to emphasize from the rest of the extant now canon. When I say is the Jesus story Gnostic, though, I do mean, is it written to be hiding the truth? I suspect it's really Marcion's creation, that he's collected the wisdom of the ages as he wishes to garner it, collect it. And he's written it into the character of the equivalent of a teacher of righteousness of the Essenes. Someone has written that story in such a way that every parable and truth, teaching and miracle and circumstance seems to reflect something in a vast cacophony of pagan literature, whether it's of Plato or Egypt or Persia. Just astonishing. It's all been said before. None of it seems to be original. The coincidence is too much for the character of Jesus to have been history, and there is no reliable reference at all, which should be overwhelming given the importance in the history and apparently the position of Christianity as regards the ruling empire in the next few hundred years. The evidence is extremely doubtful and extremely tenuous in the most recorded time in history to date. Roman history. You know, everything was being written down. Every transaction, every order of Caesar, everything's written down. Everything that's important in this empire. I think the Gospels does what Paul did not pull off. And it wasn't written by Paul. It's written by someone like Marcion, who had the wherewithal to write the epic story. And no doubt it was upgraded and added to by other gospel writers and the church. And the result is we've kept the harvest from it, which is the four Gospels. There is no historic Jesus. There are lots of Jesuses, of course, messiahs and so on, but not in the wonderful way that's in that Gospel story of Jesus. And it crystallizes what we would value now that it's written, of ancient wisdom, Sophia, right from the notion of loving God with all your heart and soul, with a few additions like mind and strength, which apparently may have been introduced by some earlier document of Moses, added to it rather by the latter document, that we now have surviving as the Pentateuch and so on. It doesn't have Paul's view of salvation. It is much more like the Essenes in character. What were they called? The Poor Society or something, weren't they? The parallel to what we think the Essenes was really like is great. It's what the ideal teacher of righteousness in some sense could be envisaged to be. It's a great epic story. From my point of view, greater than anything the Greeks came up with or anyone else has come up with. But I don't worship it. I don't think Marcion personifies what Gnosticism is. I think the Jesus story is in the tradition of great epic writings. And the proof is in the eating of it, the following of it, practicing it. It doesn't matter how right the story is. It's what your values are that count. And you are, it seems, far more effectively going to hurtle towards life eternal if you see God as the personification of those values. For that you can indeed love with all your heart and soul. And love your neighbour as yourself. In other words, those that have rescued you want very much them to be rescued spiritually too. That is what loving one's neighbour is. Not buying him lots of cream cakes, of course. The great contribution of the Jesus story is the ministry that Jesus has in the story, which is to tell you that God's name is Dad. And if you accept this way of thinking of God, you will be on a terrifically strong foundation. If you see that God as loving and kind, as well as powerful and all-knowing and loving you in particular, then you will have the hope and the dynamism to move in the right direction at great speed. I think that is the strength of the story, and it's invaluable. And I'm not terribly interested in how it came to be written or who wrote it. I'm fascinated by one thing and one thing central, which is to see God as a loving God. My mum's idea, best friend. Paramahansa's idea, Divine Mother. Jesus' view in the story, Heavenly Dad, Abba. And the consequence of that is just wonderful. This is life eternal, to know Thee, the only true God. So, therefore you purpose and pursue knowing God. Yes, you read scripture. Yes, you might listen to this, that and the other religion just to see if they're going to be helpful in this regard. But you have a different goal. My goal is not to belong to, not to follow. My goal is only to know God. Why? Because I think He's a loving heavenly Dad. And loving and heavenly in what way? He has my values. Not yours, not his, not the church's, not the world's, not Jesus', not this story, not that story. My values. I couldn't love anything that didn't have my values. And if I love that personification as God rather than any other personification of God, I will do it enthusiastically and well, because I truly believe in this. This is what I value. And I'm going to trust Him, of course, that He'll reveal to me the truth of the things I've got wrong, either by, word of knowledge, or, I read it, I hear it of someone and think, my goodness, yes, that seemed much more true than what I was thinking. That's what I value. Or I see it in the way things turn out in the world around me, or I experience it. And that's why I'm here in this world, to learn. Not here to change the world. The world's been here and presumably doing what God has wanted most efficiently for thousands of years. To me, the world looks historically abominable in many ways, but at the same time the world is fantastic. Fantastically made, so are we, and it's an absolute miracle, the provision that all of us have been blessed with, if we've lived at all in this experience. And that's what matters, not theology, not who was right, who was wrong, how it came to be, whether so-and-so lived or not. Absolutely irrelevant. What's relevant is what is true, and in particular what's true about God, and that understanding of truth. And what does bring the possibility of life eternal. Because that's what we really value. We value abundant life, good life, wonderful life, and life without end. And to believe in that possibility rather than not, well, to not believe in it is a loser from the start. But to believe in it means it's possible, conceivable, and you're not going to find out any other way than by believing in it, because a person who doesn't hope for something doesn't lift a hand to move towards it.